And now, America's healthcare advocate, Kerry Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA from Alaska to Florida all the way to Hawaii. Our producer today, Mr. Darren Wilhite. I'm your host, Kerry Hall. This is your show, America. Thank you for joining us and making us one of the most listened to talk shows throughout the United States. 294 affiliates strong, thanks to all of you out there in the listening audience. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can do that at America's Healthcare Advocate. That is the Facebook page. Also, all these shows are posted on podcast platforms, SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, and Apple Play. Also, the Odyssey platform, if you want to go up there. So you hear today's show is going to be really interesting. It's targeted basically at small business owners, people that have 50 employees or less. You know, if you're an employee, if you're an owner, if you're a partner, maybe you're the person that manages all of the human resource stuff, you're probably going to want to listen to this, and you may want to tell somebody else about it because it's going to be informative and it's going to be very different, a different approach to health insurance and how to manage it. So, again, that podcast platform is up there for a reason. You hear about this, you want to tell somebody about it, have them go listen to the podcast, and they'll get to hear the show just like we did it here in the studio. If you are looking for Medicare and you're chronologically challenged, you can reach out to the lovely Joyce Thompson at 877-385-2224. She is happy to help you anywhere in the country. Give her a call. Also, as I always say, Jim Lodge, who just happens to be in studio today with me. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Kerry.
Welcome, Maria. Glad to have you here today.
Hi, Kerry. Good
and
to
I always
see
say, as I open the show, so I always tell you can reach out to Jim Lodge if you're looking for employer-sponsored healthcare group health insurance. Well, today he's right here in the studio, and that's what we're going to actually be talking about. So I've welcomed them both here. So Jim Lodge is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for RPS Benefits by Design, and Maria Allers is the Director of Client Services at RPS Benefits by Design. They are a national company. They have offices in Overland Park, Kansas, St. Joseph, Missouri, Phoenix, Arizona, Nashville, Tennessee, Albuquerque, New Mexico. They write policies all over the country, whether it's Texas, California, Alabama, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, it doesn't matter. They can do business anywhere in the country, and they do. So the purpose of today's show, you know, when I do these kind of broadcasts, I'm trying to bring you information and educate you in alternatives, whether it's something like bioidentical hormone replacement or Alzheimer's, whatever the case may be. The idea is to get information out to the audience. And so in today's world, employers that are 50 or less are trapped. They're trapped because of the Affordable Care Act, and they're trapped because of the policies that they have and the options they have available to them. And they're pretty narrow, aren't they, Jim?
They certainly are narrow. You know, a number of employers aren't even aware that there are other options available besides the marketplace. Generally, you're going to see that those smaller employers are going to be just naturally gravitate toward the fully insured plans, and those can be problematic, as you know, Kerry, when you have a small population that you're, you just don't have a big pool that you're distributing among.
Yeah, and the problem with that, Maria, is that they get into these plans, and the first year they get a premium they think they can live with, and then what happens in the second, third, and fourth year, if they last that long?
Well, usually the years following, like you're talking about, Kerry, is that they'll get the renewal increase. And so really what, we do is really look at the claims and look at their history to try to be more strategic in not chasing rates, but more of planning it out for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and that's really that's the way it's done for the big guys. Okay, when you're talking about clients that are in the Pareto Contrarian Re or some of the other Berkeley captives, they tell you up front. When I was doing Pareto when they first started out, one of the things that we made clear to all the people, the clients coming in, the employers coming in, is this is not a 1-year deal. You're coming into this thing looking 2, 3, 4 years, and it's very interesting. I remember, bringing a client to one of the quarterly meetings that they had, and we had kind of a luncheon. Everybody was out in the common area of this hotel eating, and the two ladies who were part of a manufacturing firm making a decision to do this were sitting, and they started asking people questions. So they actually started talking to a group that was one of the first 5 to ever join Pareto. They'd been in it for like 6 years. Wow. And when they asked them why, they said, well, we'll never leave. And the reason we'll never leave is because this is completely different and it controls cost and gives benefits. The problem is, under 50, you can't get into those organizations. You don't have a big enough premium. So we've got kind of halfway solutions like level premium. But the problems with that, Jim, are what?
Well, with level funded, I think that, you're trying to predict on your own what the appropriate kind of premium is going to be. But there are significant advantages as well, which is if you get to the end of the year and you've had a good experience, you're not going to be necessarily lining the insurance company's pocket with that. You're going to get a rebate, and that can be very powerful.
It can be. The problem, and again, Maria, they seem to last maybe 2 years. Sometimes you might get to the third year. But the first year that you have a bad claims year, you get the renewal, and the renewal, I'm speaking from experience, your renewal is 121%. I remember we had a group up in Minnesota, and they were a farm group. And they had been on level premium with a major carrier for 3 years, and then they had 2 really bad claims come in, and they had 121% increase. The whole idea behind giving the 121% increase was to make them move off the plan, and that's exactly what happened. So then what happens? You go back to the fully insured, you start the game all over again.
Well, that's correct. And as Maria was saying earlier, you really have to not be tempted by the renewal that's right in front of you to be concerned about that, but really continue to look at this as kind of a long game. 3 to 5 years, what are things looking like in terms of keeping that trend down, doing there's various things that you can do to help offset that. And it's not just raising the employee contribution, which is what some people will just do. There are a number of other things that you can do to help offset that, like perhaps you unbundle the drugs or something like that. And when I say unbundle, you go to a pharmacy benefit manager that specifically can help you keep that drug spend under control. And that in today's world, that's close to a third of your typical spend on a medical plan. And so it becomes you can do some pretty innovative things to help control that.
Yeah, and Maria, the problem is that and I always find this kind of interesting, when you sit down with, let's say, a manufacturing company, and he's a small manufacturer, and maybe he's got 15, 20 employees, and he's making, we had a client that made railroad crossing signs, the big aluminum signs with the lights on. That's what they did. Superior Aluminum Castings, they were clients forever. When you ask the question, if your suppliers were charging you 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 18% a year, what would you continue with the same supplier?
No, because that's additional overhead costs for us, right? So really what we want to do is help our clients have the flexibility in their plan to really affect their bottom line and their employees' pocketbook too. I think a lot of small employers don't understand the benefits piece of it, and that's what we're here to do, is to help really piece out the information and really figure out what the strategy should be for each piece. We have a plan that is even for lower paying individuals, employees, that we can help out too. And again, with small businesses, it's just so overwhelming, the information.
Yeah, and it's like a vicious circle, Jim. Okay, so the broker comes in and goes, we're going to go to level premium this year. That's going to lower. You're going to get a good rate. You get a good rate. Second year, you're okay, maybe. Third year, bang. Okay, you get hit with a huge increase. Okay, now it's back over to fully insured because they have to take you, and there's no underwriting. Okay, so you're back and forth with the shell game. And as Maria said, it's not a permanent solution. You're trapped in this circle, and you're just going around and around.
Yeah, we call that chasing claims. I think Maria mentioned it earlier. And you want to, or chasing rates. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself in such a way, whether it's through some alternative funding arrangement or more likely just finding a carrier that's built in such a way that they do a better job of pooling everybody instead of hitting you with it. They're, maybe it's an association affiliated plan or something like that has a larger pool to kind of smooth out those premiums, that kind of thing.
But again, that takes a broker that's willing to do the work.
Well,
and that doesn't mean walking and dropping a spreadsheet on the table and go, well, pick your poison, pick the one that's the least of all of these that are available. That's not the way this works. So there are better ways to do this. That's the purpose of doing this broadcast today. If you want to reach out to Jim or Marie, you can do that at 877-385-2224 anywhere in the country. Here locally, it's 913-385-2224. They're happy to chat with you, set time to get together, and and just kind of review what you're doing and see if there's a better way to do it. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA.
Well, tell me, darling, am I right? Am I right?
Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the fruited plain here on the HIA Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to our website, healthradio.us, healthradio.us. If you have a question, if you need help with something, send me an email. I'll be happy to respond and get back to you as quickly as I can. So once again, the website, healthradio.us. My producer, the always perfect Mr. Darren Wilhite, in studio with me, Jim Lodge and Maria Allers from RPS Benefits by Design. So here's the thing, people, okay? You know, I've worked with these people. Benefits by Design is my old agency that is now part of RPS. I've worked with these people for the last 8-9 years, whatever it is, okay? A lot of the same people that were there when I was running Benefits by Design are still there. The point I want to make here is if you want somebody that's going to look at this differently, you heard Maria and you heard Jim, take an approach that's not, oh, here we go again this year. Look at it at a 2, 3, or 4 year window and see how you can bring these things in control. You're not cost shifting over to the employees and you're improving benefits. It can be done. But you've got to reach out and ask for help. The website is rpsbbdi.com, rpsbbdi.com, or you can call 877-385-2224. I don't care if you're in Tyler, Texas, listening to me, or Pensacola, Florida. It doesn't matter where you're at in the country. They can help you anywhere you're at, and they're happy to do that and consult with you. So give them a call and find out what could make a difference for you. So let's go, Jim, and talk a little bit about some of these pieces that go into this. And let's start with medical trend. What is that, and how do we explain that to the audience?
So the medical trend is a projection, and in this case, I pulled data from PwC, and they're saying that average trend is going to be about 6.5%. That's the increase over last year.
Yeah.
It's essentially medical inflation for the insurance component, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you're in the bottom half of that average, it's fantastic. I think most employers would welcome less than a 6.5% increase, especially these small employers that we're talking about. Unfortunately, that trend includes a lot of larger employers, and the smaller employers tend to be the ones that really get hit. We had one example where a very small employer, a church actually, was looking at an 88% increase from one year to the next because of a particularly bad claim.
I remember when that happened to the city of Marion, Illinois. It was on the front page of the newspaper down there. 88% increase from the good people at Blue Cross of Illinois.
But the interesting thing about that one was they were allowing Medicare participants on the plan, or Medicare eligibles on the plan, and so we fixed that and got it down to less than a 10% increase. So, it was all concentrated with those folks that had an alternative that's, as you know, Carrie, is probably as good as anything you can get in the insurance area.
And that's really kind of interesting because it's amazing what people don't know. This is not their business. You don't really expect them to, but that's a classic example. Maria, if you're 65 years or older and you're staying on a health insurance plan, you're pushing that premium through the roof for everybody else that's on it. But you can move to a Medicare Advantage plan with the zero premium. That's right. Zero.
That's
okay.
Right.
No deductible, no co-insurance. Okay. And lots of benefits like the Blue Cross and Blue Shield plan with Blue Bucks bonus, I think it's called. You're looking at $1,000 that you can use for over-the-counter things up to $1,000. I mean, all these different benefits are part of it, and there's no premium attached to it. Yet it's a better deal than paying 50% or 25% or 30% of the premium for you and your wife or you and your husband on a group plan, yes?
That's correct, yeah. And we have specialists that can help you navigate through that. But also what it helps is the small business owners to help reduce or keep their rate low for the other employees as well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a group that Joyce Thompson and I years ago went to see downtown Kansas City, and they do watch parts for watches no longer in production all over the world. And it was fascinating, group of people. All but 3 of the people were over 65. They were all on a group health insurance plan. You don't even want to know what the rate was, Jim. Joyce moved them all over to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Medicare Advantage plans. They were happy as they could be, and they're still on them to this day. But it dropped premium like a rock for the younger people in the company. But somebody's got to be willing to take the time to do that.
And that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We look at utilization. We look at claims report. We look at the claims report to really try to validate, to make sure that it's accurate. And then we decide if we need to go to market to look at different rates.
So you mentioned something in the first segment, and 1/3 of the cost of what makes up the cost of medical plans, and that's prescription drugs. So talk a little bit about that. When we come back in the third segment, we're going to get into this in greater detail, but talk about what that is and how that impacts the premium and the increases. Jim?
Well, it's a huge cause of the premium increases. I had one client that I've been working with, and they were looking at a 30 to 40% increase for their medical costs for this next year. And when we stripped it all down, the actual non-drug claims were actually trending flat to down. Everything was driven by the increase in the drug spend. And there are some things that can be done, as I mentioned earlier, to really try and control that. A lot of people don't realize this, but drug importation from Canada, it's the same FDA-approved drugs, and you can get them for 20 to 50% of the cost of what you would pay for them in the U.S. You can do things like patient assistance programs. A number of these patient assistance programs don't really take into account. So there are a number of things you can do. Some of the more innovative programs out there, the more innovative health plans out there, have actually started to solicit the foundations that these pharmaceutical companies have set up and been able to get drugs for free. One particular group that I'm aware of, they went to over 100 of these foundations and negotiated and found they were able to build a formulary of over 600 generic drugs that are commonly prescribed for free. No cost to the employee, no cost to the employer. I mean, the stuff's out there.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though, when I'm talking about you got to be willing to do the work. If you're the broker, you've got to be willing to do the work. And there's a big difference, okay? You guys are, willing to go the extra mile. Everybody wants to go write that 500 life case. Everybody's chasing that same bus that's a broker or an agent. That's how it works. I remember back, when my wife and I started Benefits by Design, we worked with the small groups. We built our business around the small employer. And because if you pay attention to that, first of all, they're loyal clients because they're happy to have the attention you're willing to pay. But it's a lot of work. And not every broker out there is willing to do that work, Jim.
Well, why would I, Carrie, when I can collect that bigger premium commission, right?
Yeah, there you go. See, and that's unfortunate, but that is, I don't think a lot of people understand that, okay? When those increases come through, that increase creates a larger commission for that broker. And so you've kind of got an interesting situation there in a lot of cases, yes?
We do. I mean, but we keep in mind the people side. I mean, the reason why we're in business is to help people with their benefits. And that's really what it comes down to for us. So, yes, we're in business to make the revenue, but we also want to do what's right for our clients.
Yeah, and that's important. It's important to understand that. If you want information, go to the website, rpsbbdi.com, rpsbbdi.com, 877-385-2224. I don't care where you're at in the country. They can help you. Give them a call. They'll be happy to do it. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Stay right there. We've got more. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website healthradio.us, healthradio.us. Send me an email. Also, if you want to tell somebody about this show, pretty interesting stuff coming out here, right? Jim and Maria going through all this information with you. Go up to the podcast platform. It's on SoundCloud. It's on TuneIn, iTunes, Odyssey, Spotify. It's up there. So you can listen to it or tell, you got a partner in your business, maybe you're an employee there and you guys are suffering with the cost of health insurance. Tell the boss. Go listen to it. It's up there, okay? My producer, Darren Wilhite. I'm your host, Kerry Hall. In studio with me, Jim Lodge, Maria Allers from RPS Benefits by Design. The website, rpsbbdi.com. That's really easy. rpsbbdi.com. The phone number anywhere in the country, 877-385-2224. They are a national firm. They can help you anywhere. All right, so this is a unique piece that y'all have developed at RPS Benefits by Design. It's a private plan, and it's very different than anything out there that I've seen. Okay, so talk a little bit about this plan, and you mentioned drug importation a minute ago. That's just one piece of this thing, but just give kind of an overall overview of this and how it leads people to do the 2, 3, and 4 year planning and not be beat up every year with the constant increases in health insurance. Jim?
Well, it's a very innovative plan for sure. What they have done is they are actually purposely built the plan to provide big company benefits, if you will, to the small employer. And when I say small employer, I mean they'll take a group of one. So you can have a 1099
that's an oxymoron, group of one.
Yeah.
Okay.
1099 that's a gig worker or something like that. They've got access to something they can that is a group plan, but it's just for that individual. And what that allows them to do, obviously they can run it through their business and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But many of the insurance carriers, for these small employer groups, they will require at least 50% participation among the employees. These guys don't care about that. They just want to make sure people get good health benefits, irrespective of whether the employer group as a whole is, having a lot of action within it. So that's one thing that they're doing. Some of the other types of things that they do is they have some pooling that is done among all these various groups, and they've been able to keep, they've been in existence about 4 years, and they've been able to keep their cost trend at 2.5% average per year.
That's pretty amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah, those are Pareto labels. We're talking the 200, 300, 400 life groups that are in the Pareto, Contrarian, Rear, the Berkeley captives. That's the kind of trend. That's the kind of increase you see there when you're in that kind of group and you're participating with the way you're supposed to.
That's right. And the other thing that they do is they have some very specific programs for dealing with, let's say you do contract some horrible disease or something like that. They have disease management, patient care advocates that will be with you the whole way through. They have some very innovative treatment protocols for more common things like a hip replacement or something like that, where they'll actually send you to a center of excellence. And the incentive, if you go to the center of excellence, where, by the way, the outcomes are much better, where you're having 3 or 4 hip replacements a day instead of
like the
one
Oklahoma
a week
Surgical
or whatever.
Center.
Yeah, the
classic example.
That's a classic example. They're able to do it at such a lower cost, and they're able to have the outcomes be much, much better. The incentive is, hey, we're going to waive your deductible if you'll go to the Center of Excellence, because it saves the plan 40, 50, 60% of what it would cost them if they went the traditional route.
Yeah, I recall one specific example that I was aware of where the hip replacement was going to be $121,000 or something like that, and they wound up doing it for like $43,000. They paid the airfare and the hotel bill to get the person having the surgery and their companion there. The reinfection rate at these places like the Oklahoma Surgical Center is less than 1%. I mean, it's far better than most of the big metro hospitals. And the outcome, if you go look it up, the outcome-based ratios of these facilities is better because, as you said, they're doing 5 or 6 of these a day, Jim. They're doing 300 or 400 of these a year. Well, you think that guy, that surgeon that's doing that many of them, or those surgeons that are doing them, probably have a pretty good idea how to do this and do it, the best way that's possible, and see as many different ways to do this as there are, and innovations out there that there are.
Well, they're going to be on the cutting edge for sure, and much more so than your guy at your local hospital that maybe does one of these every few weeks or something like that. So
yeah, again, you're controlling costs at the same time. you're allowing people to get better benefits, and that's really what it's all about. You know, Maria, it's really interesting. A lot of the major carriers won't write a group that's less than 5 people. You've got 5 lives or less, you're not going to be able to get policy from certain carriers that are out there now. I don't know, if Aetna, United are still not doing that, or they're doing it. I know they weren't doing it for a long time. And then the problem is the rates for those policies are really high.
That's right.
So they're trapped. And, as Jim said, this goes all the way down to 1 life. But, again, if you've got 10 lives or 15 lives or 12 lives and you're battling with this is an alternative that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Certainly has for a number of our clients. Just when you take a look at whether it's, any of the traditional carriers really, especially when you get out into some of the rural areas where there may be a dominant carrier and they basically can set their price wherever they want.
They control the market.
It comes down to. But these guys have been able to penetrate some networks that are more prevalent in some of those rural areas, and they're able to provide the care for these folks, and then doing the innovative things like being able to, as you mentioned earlier, taking folks to centers of excellence and things like that.
We're excited to have this private plan. I mean, we get a lot of clients that do run into the challenge of a lot of employees going on to Medicare, and then they're left with spouses and whatnot without care, without a plan. So we're excited about this private plan because then we have this option now. Whereas when you're working with the big BUCAs, you don't have that option because there is a number requirement.
Yeah, there is. And there's participation requirement, as you said, Jim. Mm-hmm. So shift gears here a minute. You touched on this a little bit. This plan's got some pretty innovative drug policies, okay? And that includes importation from Canada, New Zealand, Australia, which, by the way, are identical to the prescription drugs here in this country. So there's no difference in them at all. But talk about some of the other things they do, because some of those other things you mentioned in the previous segment are part of this plan.
Well, some of the other things they're doing, as we discussed, the patient assistance program, that can be extremely powerful, particularly with the low pays. I mean, I'm not going to, pretend that all those patient assistance programs don't take income into consideration. Many of them do, but those are the folks that really need the help. And you can have a situation, Humira is a great example of a drug that's, $5,000 a month or something like that. Well, nobody can afford that, even if you do have a good income. And with negotiation, you can get that down to, if not free, you can certainly get it down to $300 or $400 or something a little more manageable for the folks that are out there needing to take it.
Yeah, and again, this makes up a third of the cost. The drug importation piece of this is very important, but also this patient assistance piece where they've gone out and connect with all these foundations and done this work so that, and then again, I don't know of any other group that's done this. Okay?
I'm not aware of anybody else that's done that.
It's a lot of work to put it together, but the benefit to the employer and the employee is huge, right, Maria?
Absolutely, especially to the employee. On the client services side, that's where we focus, right? Is the employee experience, and it's easy to enroll. You have an advocate for you to walk you through what you need. A lot of employees, they'll run into, I need to get an MRI. I need to get, certain lab procedures done, and they don't know who to turn to. And now they have someone to turn to, like Jim mentioned, a patient advocate specialist.
Yeah, and it's nice to have somebody that can help you navigate this. So again, like I said when I started this show, the purpose of doing this today is to educate you. Take the time to listen to what we're saying here and pick up the phone and give them a call. You've got nothing to lose. You've got a lot to gain. I don't care where you're at in the country, and I don't care how big your plan is or how big your number of employees or small it is. They can help you. You can go to the website, rpsbbdi.com, send them an email. You got a contact sheet up there?
Well, sure.
Okay, so there's a contact sheet up there. Fill out the contact sheet and send it to them. If you don't want to call, if you want to call and just talk to them, 877-385-2224. Jim's happy to chat with you. Marie's happy to chat with you. Once again, it's 877-385-2224. You're not going to learn how to do this in a better way unless you take the time to reach out and see if these folks can help you, and I think they probably can. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Stay right there. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website healthradio.us. My producer, Mr. Darren Wilhite. I'm your host, Kerry Hall. In studio with me, Jim Lodge, Maria Allers from RPS Benefits by Design, a national health insurance brokerage agency there to help you. The website, rpsbbdi.com, rpsbbdi.com. Phone number 877-385-2224, 877-385-2224. So, again, if you're a partner in a business, or maybe you're the employee, or you're one of the owners, whatever the case may be, maybe you're doing all the human resource stuff, you want to tell somebody else about this, go to the podcast platform, SoundCloud, TuneIn, iTunes, Apple Play, Odyssey. It's up on all those platforms. They can listen to it just like we did it, and then they'll have an understanding of why you think this is worth looking into and something you may want to do. Also, if you just want to reach out, you can always call 877-385-2224. So we've talked about employers, that have got employees there 365 days a year around the regular workforce, et cetera. But there are a lot of employers that have seasonal employees, okay, or employees that are making a very small amount of money. Maybe they're part-time employees, whatever the case may be. What's out there for them, Jim?
Well, one of the things that we have access to is an innovative minimum essential coverage plan, Kerry. And what that means, there are a lot of them out there, and a lot of them, frankly, aren't that.
They're not worth
great.
the paper they're written on.
They're
Really, very frankly, they're lousy. Okay?
They really aren't. But we've found one that we partner with them pretty closely in terms of designing the plan and all that kind of stuff. And what it is it's got the features and functions of a traditional ACA plan in terms of the wellness is all covered at no additional cost. They've got upfront first dollar coverage for things like doctor visits and for prescription drugs and that kind of thing. And they've just built in some stops associated with that are perfectly reasonable. And for your average employee, it's going to provide the kind of coverage that they're going to be able to take advantage of, but at less than $300 a month. So if you think about that, if you're making $15-18 an hour, that can be a nice alternative if for whatever reason you can't afford the Cadillac plan or the traditional major medical plan or whatever that the employer is offering. And there's no deductible. That's huge.
Repeat that again?
There's no deductible. It's huge.
Here's the thing. The people we're talking about in these kind of situations don't make a lot of money. They can't necessarily afford to pay 50% of an $800, $900, $1,200, $1,700 a month premium. The employer picks up 50%, they pick up. You go to a MEC plan at $300, the employer pays $150, maybe they pay $150, or the employer pays all of it. Well, it gives them a number of things, doesn't it, Maria? They get they get employee retention because you're doing it, and the guy down the road with the same landscaping company isn't doing it. So you're going to be able to attract better people and keep them, yes?
Yes, retention and recruiting. I mean, the most heartbreaking thing we hear is employees not enrolling in medical coverage because they can't afford it, but they have medical needs. And so this minimum essential coverage provides that for them. We had a client that a mother of 3 couldn't enroll in medical coverage. And so when we offered them the MEC plan, she was over the moon that she was able to provide something versus nothing for her family.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Jim. I've seen the outline of that plan. You've got a doctor office copay in there. You've got specialists in there. You've got prescription drug benefits in there. You've got a surgical benefit and an inpatient hospital. It's finite. I mean, it's capped at a certain level, but you've got access. Oh, and by the way, don't you have access to a regular network through that plan?
Absolutely. It's a national network. National PPO network. So that can be very advantageous because it's a much larger network than what you're going to see with maybe an ACA marketplace plan or something like that has an exclusive provider organization. This is a national PPO. that they're going to have access to.
So,
with copays, Carrie, that's huge.
Yeah, it is, because none of the other MEC plans that I've seen offer that. Okay, what they do is they say they're giving the employer a screen for coverage to say that he's complying with ACA regulations, when in reality the only thing that's being covered is basically preventive care to some degree. But there is no doctor office, primary care provider, specialist, prescription drug benefit, x-ray lab, any of that stuff. That's all part of this plan. It's all in there and can be used. So for a lot of people, as you said, Maria, and you talked to, it gives them access to what they call daily needs, yes?
Yes, absolutely. It feels and looks just like any other regular plan at a lower cost.
Yeah, $300 per employee. Try to find another plan out there that with no deductible.
Right. No doubt about that. The other beauty of this thing, Carrie, you can enroll in it the first of any month of the year. There's no open enrollment period. You can actually jump on this plan, August 1st or September 1st or what have you, and get rolling, and then you're on there going forward.
And you don't need to have any life qualifying events either.
None of that. There's no pre-existing condition underwriting or anything for this plan.
Okay, so that's kind of important. So there's no pre-existing condition exclusions on this plan. So they come on this, they've got coverage from day one regardless.
Correct.
Yeah, that that's pretty unique. So we're wrapping it up here. We've got a little less than about a minute left, but you've got two basic plans here that I think RPS Benefits by Design to these private plans that I don't think anybody else that I know of is actually doing this right now.
That's correct. We've got an exclusive in our markets.
And that can be very helpful, and I think that's something people need to know about. It's again, as I said when I started this broadcast, the purpose here is to give you information that is different than what you're going to see in the typical marketplace. And again, Marie, it's more work for you. Okay, it's more work for Jim. But at the end of the day, it works out to be a far better program for the employer and the employee, yes?
Yes, and that's what we're here for. When we can make a difference and we can make an impact to employees, it makes the amount of work that we do worth it, Carrie.
Yeah, because you've accomplished something,
That's right.
And it gives people an opportunity to provide decent benefits. So if you're tired of the year-to-year upheaval with renewals, and it's right around the corner, we're getting into that season. Here we come. September, October, November, and December. Here we come. This is your chance to step out now. Do it now. Don't wait, okay? And look at doing something that's different that can make a big difference for you, your business, your employees. You heard Marie talk about retention and recruitment. Whether it's the MEC plan or it's the health insurance plan, it's the same thing, okay? If you offer good benefits to people, especially with the heightened awareness of what's happened with COVID, it's important. If you want help, 877-385-2224, 877-385-2224. The website, rpsbenefitsbydesigninc.com or rpsbbdi.com. And now I leave you with this thought from Albert Einstein. The one who follows the crowd will usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been. Remember, friends, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the very best, you most often get it. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Goodbye, America.